So I want to talk a little bit today about weeding a garden, keeping weeds out, and particularly about mulching a garden. Got the dog chasing chickens here. Leave him alone. So there's been a lot of research done on mulching, different types of mulch. A lot of people have their different methods, different opinions. A lot of it's based off of research. Ours is based off of economy and laziness. That's how we do our mulching and our weeding. So I'm going to show you a few things about that. So we are weeding beans right here. One thing to save us time with weeding, we don't necessarily worry about weeding every single weed, and we even sometimes let them grow up a little bit so that they're easier to pull. The main reason for weeding is to keep them from fighting for nutrients and water with your plants, and when they're small they don't battle that much, and as the plants get bigger they'll start to shade out the weeds, and so really we just focus on the ones that are the same size or bigger than our plants that we want to keep. And we do sometimes pull the smaller ones just because. Why do we pull them, Anna? Because it's fun. Right?
Yeah, and so they don't eventually grow up to start fighting their plants.
Yeah, so you can get them when they're smaller, but you don't have to get every weed. The other thing to consider is as we pull these weeds, we stir up the dirt a little bit. The assumption is that there is always weed seeds in there, so the more we stir up the dirt, the more we're just making a seed bed for new weeds to grow. And so you're always going to have some weeds. There's no way you're ever going to keep up with them, keep them all completely gone, unless you're spending an excessive amount of time weeding. We try to keep as many down as we can, but this garden is also newer, and so we have more weeds than we would on a more established garden. This is the second year on this part, and when we look at the other part of the garden, it's got a lot of grass in it. That part is this is the first year we're planting it, and so it's going to have more grasses and more weeds. So when we mulch in our garden, there's a lot of kind of hype right now around the wood chips in the garden. The Back to Eden Gardens is a big one that they've pushed a lot for that, and a lot of people really like it. We've never done wood chips because I don't know where you get that many wood chips at. They got to spend a fortune. You can't get free wood chips around here. They're always pretty expensive. And so the two things that we use most often are, one, grass clippings. That's what we've got going here. And we have done very little weeding in this section. All I've really done is just pile those grass clippings on top. This closer end has been probably a week that those clippings are there. At the far end has been probably a month to a month and a half. And you can see there's very little difference in how many weeds are there. We haven't weeded on the sides, and these grass clippings haven't spread to the sides a lot where that grass is taller because there's actual plants in there and we don't want to choke them out. But we'll use the grass clippings. The other thing that we use is straw. It's easy for us to get large quantities of straw around here, and so we'll do that. We'll probably do more of the straw in the fall when we can just cover the entire garden. That'll be better at choking out all the grasses that we have than it will right now if we do it in the fall, because we can just put a big blanket down over top of the whole garden. But that's the economy of it. Is I'm sure the wood chips would be awesome and they're probably great to work with, but they are very expensive for us. Grass clippings are free except for the labor, and I just have the kids do that. The straw we can usually get for free. There's a lot of old straw around here. Sometimes people use hay. Hay is not very cheap around here. There's not a lot of free stuff, and the hay usually ends up being more of a mat that chokes the weeds out, but it also creates almost an air barrier on top, and you end up like pickling your soil more than just choking out the weeds, and so the soil gets kind of gross underneath. The weed fabric, a lot of people are starting to use weed fabric as well. We don't use weed fabric because of that. One, it's also expensive. The weed fabric is not only expensive, but when you put it down, it blocks out a lot of the air that flows through there, and so it can kind of pickle your soil as well. It almost like ferments it, and it doesn't do real great for the soil. I've never found one that breathes well enough that it doesn't cause problems, or it just lets the weeds grow up through it. And so we don't use the weed fabric, we use the straw or the grass clippings. And maybe someday we'll venture into wood chips, but that's expensive for us now, so we don't do that. So when we're weeding, we have two priorities of weeds. Those that are about to go to seed. So Anna's showing here a really big weed that she found. That's a great example of how they can grow up with the plants. That is no threat to those plants at all. It's not taking much nutrients. The plants are mostly choking it out. It's managed to get through the canopy. Goes to show us how easy it is to pull though. When they're big like that, they come out super easy and you can get all the roots. So as long as the weed's not going to seed or it's not choking out a plant, it's fine to grow. We'll get to it when we can. And we just kind of prioritize our weeding that way. The bigger issue than these weeds is the grass, and I'll show you that. So this grass right here happens to have corn growing in it, but it makes it exceptionally difficult to pull when the grass lays down like that, because you can't grab an individual weed and pull it out. Sometimes we can get the roots, but it'll pull up big chunks, and oftentimes it'll just tear the top of the grass off and it'll just grow right back. And so the grass is harder to get out. It's also harder to hoe the grass up. And so even in the middle of them, it's harder to pull. So that's the ones that we're gonna lay the mulch down on top of it and try to choke that out more than we're gonna worry about pulling it. So all this grass right here is growing on the edge of our garden. The fence is just right over there. I wouldn't normally worry about it because it's not really impeding any plants, but it is starting to go to seed. And so we want to get that out of here so we don't spread more grass for next year. So this we will try to pull out as much as we can, but it's going to be hard. We'll have to mulch some of it if we can, but it's going to be probably the hardest to get rid of is on this edge where it's already going to seed. So we'll have to, that'll be our next priority after we get through the plants and get the ones that are choking them out pulled. One more thing to consider about weeds is identifying weeds. Not all weeds are necessarily bad. So we're on the back end of this garden up against the neighbor's field, and here we've got a whole bunch of this.
It's called lamb's quarter.
It's called lamb's quarter. It's basically like a spinach. So it's edible. I don't really worry too much about pulling it because if we wanted to, we could eat it, and it doesn't spread that much like most weeds. And where it's growing, it doesn't matter if it's there. It's not hurting anything. So we just leave it alone. We don't waste our time on pulling it, but we can't eat it. Now the next question is, what do you do with the weeds once we've pulled them up? So we'll pull up some of this grass here. This is over by our raspberries. It's tough to pull. There. So pull it up like that. Take it. Throw it on the ground. That'll be mulch. Especially in these big grasses like that, a lot of times we can lay this down pretty thick and it'll actually choke out other grasses from growing up. The other thing we can do, where we've got our pigs on this side, we can pull this up. Ugh. Got the roots on that one. And toss it right over the fence. If they were interested in it. The pigs and the chickens will both eat that. They'll clean it up pretty good. And we've thrown lots of weeds in there and you can't see them anymore. I mean, they've cleaned it all up or ground it into the ground, one or the other, and so it takes care of it real quick. We don't have to worry about it that way. So if you were using hay or straw or grass clippings for mulch, one of the most important things is making you get it thick enough. So when we put down these grass clippings, that's where I'm standing at right now. You can see them back there. I put it down about a foot thick. It compacts really quick. So this right here is probably, that's about 4 inches now. That used to be up about this high. Now it's gone down probably 4 to 6 inches, so I try to get it close to a foot thick if I can. And then another benefit of this mulch is you will still have weeds that grow through the mulch or in the mulch, but they will be very sparse and the roots are really easy to pull out. So if we can see this, I have several thistles growing up in here. These are usually quite difficult to get out. The roots are pretty strong and usually break them off. These will probably break off once they hit the ground, but even as I pull this back, you can see how flimsy those roots are, how easy they are to get at. And I can just come down in that mulch, pull it off. It still breaks off about at the ground, but you get a good portion of that root and that'll likely not grow back up through that. There's a good one. It loosens up the soil underneath, so this is where the mulch was sitting. That's where we hit soil. I was able to get that much out of it because that mulch will loosen up the soil underneath, make it real soft and easy to pull the weeds out of. As this sits for longer, it'll get even softer and that'll be much easier to pull. Lest you doubt me when I talk about choking out this grass, I wanted to show you this. So all this we're looking at right now is new this year. Last year, it looked like that. Just full of grass. So on this side over here is where we fed the cows. The hay was really thick. It choked out most of that grass, killed it before we tilled it up. So there's very little grass growing there. We come over on this side. This is where we did not feed the cows at. They walked through that area, but there was no hay on the ground to choke it out. And so it just grew right back just as thick as could be. And so that's the difference between choking out the grass and not having enough mulch to do anything.
Our first tomato!
Hello.
Tonight we're gonna build, just real quick, a little run to put these ducks in. We just got these 2 little ducks. They're just getting big enough that they can kind of run free on their own. So we're gonna build a little run for them right on the edge of the garden. My hope is that they can stick their little bills through the garden fence and eat some of the grass that's on the other side of that fence, and we'll just kind of keep them in tight to that fence, make a little run where they can just loop around the outside of the garden and try to beat back some of this grass that's grown up where we have removed a lot of the manure where the cows were. The cows had knocked out all the grass, but when I built this fence I had to shovel it back a little bit And so when I exposed the dirt, the grass came up pretty heavy, and so we're gonna kind of see if we can beat that back. So we're gonna get into working putting these ducks in here.
I'm just gonna eat all the hay over here. Oh, you guys are stinky pigs. Tomatoes are getting curly leaves. I don't remember what causes it.
Well, I only had a short amount of time to work on this. I was hoping to get it done tonight, but didn't happen. I'll show you the little bit I've got. Come around this way so the light's a little better. I've just got some chicken wire here. Probably can't see it, but that is chicken wire there. Hooks up to that post over there, wraps around this post behind me, and then comes all the way up the edge of that garden. Hooks on the post down there. This is just some old chicken wire that we had lying around. So it's not really standing up right now, it's mostly laying down. It's not gonna keep anything in. I'm gonna have to work some of the ground's uneven under it too, but it's getting dark. I've already suffered an injury in the dark. Walked into a piece of random barbed wire, cut my leg open, so we're gonna call it a night and we'll revisit this tomorrow. See if we can't get it fixed up and get these ducks in here. So I brought you all out in the rain today. I'm all bundled up like it's the middle of winter again. It's about 48 degrees and raining pretty hard. Kind of interesting for almost being the 4th of July. But just wanted to wrap this up with what we did with the ducks. So I got that fence all finished up for them. You can see here just a little bit. They have been clearing out some of that grass there. So that's our hope. I don't know if these 2 little ducks will be enough to clear that all out fairly quickly. Eventually they will, but we'll see how long it takes them. But we'll catch you guys next time.